Hey guys, it's Libby, and this is a review that has been some 7 years in the making. I'm finally going to talk about The Crimson Petal and the White by MICHEL FABER, and also the companion collection of short stories, The Apple. So in case you don't know, I have tried to get through this 900 or so page book twice, and I failed. First time I failed after part 1, there are 5 parts, so around page 134, and then the second time I failed somewhere in the middle of part 3. I was like halfway done, but then I wimped out. But now, finally gotten to the end. It took me more than a month, but that's less time than it took me to read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which was almost exactly a year. So this is a historical fiction novel set in London in the 1870s, and it's mainly about prostitution. And so let me be quite clear. There is a lot of weird sex stuff in this book, including that thing you're thinking of, it's in it. So that probably either makes you kind of not want to read it or really definitely want to read it, even though you won't admit it. And just so you know, most of the sex is not sexy. It's slightly gross and awkward and not romantic at all. There are only 2 sexy sex scenes and neither of them is actually real. Okay, now that we've gotten rid of all those lily-livered people, we can talk about the rest of the book. For a book as long as Crimson Petal is, it has a surprisingly small cast of characters. There's only 5 or 6 sort of main characters and then maybe another dozen side characters that you should bother to learn the names of. It's not like a Dickens novel or like The Mists of Avalon, which had like 30 main characters. And it only takes place over slightly more than a year, so you're probably like, how is there this much to say about so few people over so short a length of time? And the reason this book manages to be so long is because MICHEL FABER is really big on the showing, not telling. For example, there is a guy who has a massive crush on this lady, but he is afraid to talk to her about it. So instead of just saying this, we spend like 6 or 7 pages going on a stroll with them, and she is talking about, you know, the usual things that one talks about, you know, society and also nature and all that sort of thing. And you get her dialogue, and you get his occasional dialogue, but you also get all of the thoughts he's thinking while they're having this conversation. And so this world feels exceptionally real and well developed. I finished this and I've started A Darker Shade of Magic, which is also set in London, somewhat inconveniently. So I'm sort of like, wait, when is sugar gonna show up in this book? So the conceit of this book is that we have a narrator who actually starts directly addressing the reader, who is taking us through the echelons of London society, from the lowliest and grubbiest whore to the super posh folks. And this is actually, I think, the weakest part of the novel. The narrator implies that we are first going to meet a very lowly person, which we do, and then move on to a fancier person, and then move on to a fancier and fancier person. But we actually just move on to one fancier person, and then we stick with her through the rest of the story, through her rise. And we don't even really stick that tightly to her. Like, as soon as we meet her a couple chapters later, we're following someone else who is a main character and we should be introduced to, but then we hop back to the lady. And so that part doesn't really work, but if you can ignore that, it doesn't harm the novel. So our main characters are Sugar, who is a prostitute, and she's a fairly high-class prostitute. She's known for being well-spoken, has thoughts about the politics and literature of the day, but she will also do anything. Then we have William Rackham, who is no longer past his prime, but is still sort of living in his college days when he could write, you know, political and philosophical treatises. Of course, he never actually wrote those political and philosophical treatises, and so he's just living off of his father's money. His father is a perfume manufacturer, and he does have quite a bit of money to spare, but he's being rather tight-fisted with William because William does not seem interested in taking over the business, and his father is worried about what's going to happen after he dies. So he's using everything he has access to, which is his purse strings, to persuade William to show some interest in the family industry. We also meet William's wife, Agnes, who really has some problems. She is like properly mentally disturbed. She also is 23 years old and doesn't know what a period is, so she just like thinks she's dying every couple of months. And then we have William's brother Henry, who decided not to go into the perfume industry, but instead to become a clergyman, but he keeps not becoming a clergyman because he is not yet pure enough. And then we have Emmeline Fox, who is also very into religion, and she expresses this by being a member of the Rescue Society, which walks around the more sordid parts of London and tries to persuade prostitutes to stop being prostitutes. It doesn't go super well. And all of these people meet and interact in various ways, very few of which are conventional. And my favorite part about this is the way the narrator, who is like properly a character, takes us sort of into the minds of each of these characters individually, not all at the same time. So we get to see each of their blind spots really distinctly about themselves or about how the world works, which are highlighted by contrast with other characters' blind spots. And then at a certain point you have to wonder, what are my blind spots? For example, Sugar, although she is a prostitute and spends a fair bit of time with men, really hates men. And she's writing a novel in which sort of caricatures of all of the various men she slept with are horribly murdered. But as the story goes on, this notion gets challenged. What? The world is not black and white? Cannot deal. So I would definitely recommend this if you think you can handle it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I'm very glad that I finally finished it. And then to briefly discuss The Apple, this is a collection of short stories that happen before and after the events of Crimson Petal. So just to very quickly review the stories that are in here. Christmas in Silver Street, the first one, you can kind of give a miss. Sugar's kind of horrible Madam Mrs. Castaway is not in it, and I was hoping that you would be and that we get to see a bit more of her. The next one, Clara and the Rat Man, is my favorite. It is definitely the sweetest story I have ever read about anal penetration and the murder of small defenseless animals. At the end, I felt all warm and fuzzy inside in a way that had nothing to do with 75 dead rats. Chocolate Hearts from the New World was pretty good. I enjoyed that. I didn't really care for The Fly and its effect upon Mr. Bodley. Bodley and Ashwell are William Rackham's friends from college, and they never really grow up, even though William is forced to. And I didn't particularly care for them, but I understand why people might like them. So if you did, you can go ahead and read that one. The Apple was quite interesting and provides some more insight into Sugar's motivations. She does some strange things towards the end of the book, and I think this might help clear those things up. And then the last two, Medicine and the title so long I have to read it, A Mighty Horde of Women in Very Big Hats Advancing. These are like two epilogues, one for William and one for a character that I have deliberately not named in this review. Intrigue. And I did like to see a little bit more of their lives after 1876. But you know what is not in this short story collection? An epilogue for Agnes. You know that is what I want, Michel Faber. Where is my Agnes epilogue? So thank you for watching. I hope I have encouraged you to try this. If you have read Crimson Petal and The Apple, let's talk about it in the comments. And I will see you with another video rather soon.